What do we celebrate on Europe's Day? We celebrate the Schuman Declaration. The Schuman Declaration, if you read it, it only proposes to pool the productions of coal and steel of 6 European countries. Coal and steel, which are some of the most important raw materials for war. But the Schuman Declaration was the beginning of a peace process, of a peace project. Why put coal and steel? Why pool the production of coal and steel? Because it ensured that the main raw materials for war were pooled among the main contenders of wars that had ravaged Europe for centuries. The last 2 wars, World War I and World War II, almost devastated Europe. So there was a cry, unanimous cry, in Europe and in the world to put an end to centuries of wars in Europe. That's why the Schuman Declaration, which we celebrate today as the Day of Europe, is a celebration of peace. And after that, we started a project of integration, which was an economic integration, because we also thought that creating solidarities of fact was also going to lead to peace. Well, it was a success. Now, some 73 years later, we can look back and we cannot see 73 years in the history of Europe with peace. It is the longest peace period among the member states of the European Union in the history of Europe. So it has been a success. It has also been a success, and we must be proud of it, because it has led to prosperity. It has led to the region of the world where human rights, rule of law, democracy, and access to the welfare state, especially to education and to health, is unparalleled. There is no other region in the world with such access to basic human needs like education and health as in the European Union. We are also proud of a single market that we celebrate this year, 30 years of single market. A space, the region where there is freedom of movement of goods, services, capital, and people. We are also proud that in most of our countries there are no borders, no physical borders, that we share, most of our countries share the euro, a currency. We are also proud that we are a force of peace in the world, because we have simultaneous translation. We are a force of peace in the world. Peace, development, and fight against climate change. We are the largest contributor to development cooperation in the world. We are one of the largest in peacekeeping operations, and we are at the forefront of the fight against climate change, the most ambitious targets in the world. So, many things to be proud of, but also we have to be aware that nothing can be taken for granted. We have to be aware that we have to work every day, and that our main success, our main achievement, which is peace, is in danger at the very gates of Europe, because over 1 year ago started the Russian aggression on Ukraine. Probably the most important violation of the United Nations Charter that has happened in Europe since World War II. And for us, this is an existential problem, because it reminds us so much of what happened at the beginning of World War II, what happened with the Nazi aggression to Czechoslovakia. This is existential. That's why we are so worried. That's why we are helping Ukraine to defend itself. And that's why we demand strongly to Russia to withdraw its troops and to respect the basic principles of the UN Charter and to respect the integral territorial integrity and independence of Ukraine, which, by the way, had been guaranteed by Russia and also supported by China, by the way, in 1994 in the treaty, in the agreement in Budapest. And there is no legitimate security concern that can justify this aggression. Let me be very clear. And there is no flaw in the European security architecture, and there is no justification for this aggression because of the supposed expansion of NATO. In fact, it is exactly the opposite. The aggression on Ukraine has caused the latest expansion of NATO. This is very clear. It is not the expansion of NATO which has caused the aggression on Ukraine. It is the aggression on Ukraine which has caused the latest expansion of NATO. Two countries that had never thought of joining NATO have now decided to join NATO in the face of this aggression. But we are also going to celebrate so many years, 30 years of partnership with China. Difficult moments, but we are ready to engage with China. And this has been demonstrated by two very high-level visits in the last 6 months. First of all, President of the European Council, Charles Michel, and very recently, President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. And we are going to hold high-level dialogues this year, leading us, we hope and we expect, to a successful summit at the end of this year, in the second part of this year. But we have told our Chinese friends and partners that we need deliverables. We need progress. As you know, we define our partnership or our relation with China as one of partnership, competition, but also systemic rivalry. But we have to use dialogue and engagement in all three. We have to manage our differences and make progress in the areas of partnership, for instance, in climate change, where we have an extremely promising partnership with China. So finally, we would like to resume not only our political dialogues, but our people-to-people exchanges. And this is very important. We are going to work very hard to resume very rich and very promising people-to-people exchanges. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now we will open for questions from your side. Please raise your hand if you have questions.
So thank you, Ambassador. So I heard you have...
Please say your name and...
yes. Okay, I'm Chao from iPhone Group. From iPhone
Phoenix.
iPhone Phoenix, yes. So you have made some comments on the Ukraine war, and we also noticed that last month China sent special envoy to solve the Ukraine-Russia war and to make peace. So do you have some special comments on that, and do you think EU can make some coordination with Chinese with China's efforts. Thank you.
You said that China sent an envoy
Yeah.
to Ukraine.
To mediate the.
Well, it was not a mediation. Okay, fine.
Yes. Thank you.
It was not, I don't know, any mediation of China. We know that there has been contacts with Ukraine. We find that it is a very positive step that President Xi, after over a year, finally spoke to President Zelensky. We are ready to talk to China. We always talk to China. We have had all these visits, and we are going to have all these visits. We always talk to China about this. We think that China, as a permanent member of the Security Council of China, as a subscriber to the Budapest Memorandum in 1994, has a special responsibility, and we would like China to go further. But this is the question that we are discussing with China, and we hope that China will help even more to get to a just peace that has to start with the withdrawal of the troops of Russia from Ukraine and the complete respect of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine.
Colin Murphy from Bloomberg. Thank you. Just on that note, you said that you're in talks with China about this delegation. Can you just clarify that?
Sure.
Are you in active talks with China about the delegation to Ukraine? And also, have you...
No. What I said is that we have been talking to China all this time, for over a year, about the Russian aggression on Ukraine. No, I didn't say that we are talking to China on this.
I think a lot of us want to know from the Chinese side, but like obviously from the European side as well. Have you heard any more specifics about this delegation to the Ukraine? Have the Chinese side reached out to you to give you a briefing as to when this might take place? What countries besides Ukraine will be visited? Will they include European?
And let me say very shortly. No, we are trying to get information. We have no information about the specific of this envoy. We don't know yet what are the countries he is going to visit, but we are trying to get that information. We don't have it yet.
And have they given you any indication that they will give you, like they get back to you with some
No,
details?
not yet.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe it's João Pimenta from Portuguese National News Agency. I have Financial Times reported this last weekend that the EU is considering to put sanctions on 7 Chinese companies for allegedly aid Russia in its invasion against Ukraine. Do you have any comment on this? Could you confirm this information? And if those sanctions, or those the potential to impose sanctions could further complicate the role of China in eventually negotiating?
I have no comment, but I don't have any information either, because this question about sanctions, I'm not confirming or denying. I'm just saying that this question on sanctions are confidential, and we are not informed. If there was something, what I can say is what I have read, and some more detailed information or informed information is that what I have read is that there is a proposal to study if there could be some action on the circumvention of sanctions. There is nothing concrete, absolutely nothing concrete, and nothing that I could comment.
Any other question?
Journalist from Caixin Media, and my question is what...
From which Chinese media?
Caixin Media.
Ah.
Caixin Media. Thank you. My question is, what can we expect on cooperation or dialogue or discussion between China and EU in the future?
Thank you very much for your question. We can expect the holding of high-level dialogues that are pending this year. We have already held one on the 17th of February on human rights, and that's very good news because this dialogue had been suspended for 4 years. But now we have to hold very important high-level dialogues. We are expecting a strategic dialogue to take place between the High Representative Vice President of the Commission, Borrell, with his counterpart, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We are expecting a high-level trade and economic dialogue. We are expecting the high-level dialogue, high-level digital dialogue, and the high-level climate dialogue, which will take place, we hope, very soon. And these are supposed to have deliverables and to make progress in things that have been quite stuck in the last 3 years, in order for us to have the final outcome of these dialogues this year, which would be the summit between the EU and China, probably in the second half of this year.
Thank you. Voice of Diplomacy. You just mentioned about the people exchanges between China and Europe, and do you have specific plans next step? Give me examples. Thank you.
Well, we have a dialogue on people-to-people exchanges that we hope we're going to resume soon. But the thing is that after 3 years of complete blocking of people-to-people exchanges, no tourism, almost no students, no Chinese students going to Europe, no European students coming here. We need to use the opportunity of the lifting of the restrictions to come back to what it was before the pandemic. So we will display, along with our Chinese counterparts, all sorts of initiatives and actions to resume these exchanges. The tourist exchanges will resume soon, now that all restrictions of COVID have been lifted, and they are resuming. But we need more flights. It is difficult, but we need more flights. They have a resumption to where we were before the pandemic will be gradual, but this will allow us to increase these people-to-people exchanges.
Yes, hello, Sébastien Berriot from the French radio. You said before the summit end of this year, you need to make a lot of progress with China, but can you give us indication about which progress? What is the main point of difficulty? Can you give us an indication about this progress?
Well, I give you 2 examples. If I had to choose between all we expect, we hope to make progress, it would be market access issues. We have a long list of market issues that we need to be solved. We need progress on those, that we have made no progress or very little progress in the last few years, and the situation is serious. Last year we had the largest trade deficit in the history of mankind between 2 trade blocs, the European Union and China. The largest in the world, in the history. And of course, we know that China produces very good quality at very good prices, but it doesn't make sense. There are so many market issues, market access issues that we have to solve, that this should be one of the most important. if I had to take one among the 100 that we have, I would say regionalization. It's a very specific technical term, but trade people know what I mean. And the second thing, in the area of partnership, would be climate change. And we have an extremely promising climate and biodiversity partnership with China, which was shown in the last COP27, in the last COP15, and in the High Seas Treaty. Well, we think we can go further. We think that we must convince China to have a greater ambition for COP this year in fight against climate change. We think that there can be good progress in methane, for instance. There can be good progress in carbon trading mechanism. And third, if I have to say a third one, of course, in the strategic dialogue, we would like to see a more constructive and helpful attitude by China in the Russian aggression against Ukraine.
Okay, thank you. The lady.
Good morning, Mr. Ambassador. I'm from Beijing Daily. And my question is, as we know, Chinese State Councillor Qin is currently visiting Germany, France, and Norway. So do you have any views on how his visit will strengthen China's relation?
Excuse me, can you repeat? You said that Premier Qin has advised not to visit those countries?
No, he's visiting. He's visiting.
Ah, okay. Sorry, I completely misunderstood you. So is visiting which countries? Germany, France?
Germany, France, and Norway.
Yeah.
So do you have any views on how his visit strengthen China's relation with Europe?
Well, I think visits by the Chinese premier to Europe are welcome. We need to talk. We need dialogue, and this is a very high-level dialogue. I cannot speak for Norway because it's not a member of the European Union, but France and Germany have had Germany, the Chancellor, and France, the President, coming to China. So I feel it is only natural that the Premier goes there. This is always good news. Talking is always good news.
Thank you.
We have no indication of what Ms. Qingang, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China, will do with Switzerland, with the French, and Norway.
No, we don't have the agenda of the talks, no. But we can more or less assume what he will talk. And I have some of the issues that I have talked about here, I'm sure will be dealt with.
Thank you. Good morning. Matthias Kamm from Swiss Daily, Neue Zürcher Zeitung. In your exchanges with the Chinese side, also with regard to preparation for these high-level dialogues and a possible summit towards the end of the year, do you guys discuss things like, first of all, the comprehensive agreement on investment that China's apparently really trying to press ahead, and how high is this issue on the agenda? And secondly, is there any discussion of a possible lifting of the sanctions after Xinjiang? I think they were implemented in 2021, not 2020. And is there any progress?
Well, I must say that, first of all, President von der Leyen, before coming here, delivered a speech, as you know, in Brussels, where she said, and this is the official position that we have, that things have changed since 2019, and that the European Union is going to reassess the comprehensive agreement on investment. So what we read from that is that we are reassessing this agreement. Second of all, this was not an issue that was talked about during President von der Leyen's visit here. Neither Kai nor the lifting of sanctions. So I'm afraid there is no news about that.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I'm from the Beijing News. I have two questions. The first one is about, we know that EU President Mrs. von der Leyen visited China last month, and the two leaders reached a lot of consensus on various topics. So is there any progress achieved between the EU and China after this special visit? And my second question is, this year marks the 20th anniversary of the establishment of the China-EU Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, but there are some voices calling for decoupling with China inside Europe, and you just mentioned that EU's systemic rivalry with China. So what's your prospects for the relations between China and the EU in the near future, and what do you think should be the main focus for this relationship? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, during President von der Leyen's visit to Beijing recently, there were many issues that were talked about. You asked about which consensus did they reach. Well, if I had to choose two, I would say, first of all, the decision to engage in our structured dialogues. That we are going to have our high-level dialogues this year, and this should lead to a substantial summit. And the second one has to do with it, because this substantial summit means a summit with deliverables, a summit with progress. So the consensus was to engage or re-engage in presential dialogues and to reach agreements, to have progress and to have deliverables. On decoupling, it was very clear, the point was made very clearly by President von der Leyen before she came here and when she was here during her talks with the Premier and the President of China, that we are not seeking decoupling. We are looking at de-risking. Unfortunately, both the pandemic and the weaponization of the energy supplies by Russia after the Russian aggression on Ukraine has taught us in Europe that we need to de-risk. We need to look very carefully at the supply of basic raw materials and basic materials that we need. So we are not looking at decoupling at all. We are looking at a very small percentage of our trade with China where we think there is an excessive concentration. So no decoupling, only de-risking.
Okay, thank you. Answer.
Thank you, Ambassador. Antonio Fariuso for ANSA Italian News Agency. I would like to ask you if you can provide any update about the two Chinese activists arrested a while ago, one on the way to visit the EU delegation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I have no update. Our information is that they have been arrested before they were supposed to arrive in the EU delegation. We have protested. We have asked for the immediate release, but we don't have any other news. We believe they have formally been charged. We don't know exactly the details, but we are asking for the immediate release because we think that we should be able, like we have been doing, we and most of the embassies of the member states of the European Union, other like-minded countries, we must be able, when we have visits in Beijing, to meet with what we call the civil society, with people who have, to our knowledge, have not broken any law. So we must be able to do that. That's why we are asking for the release. But unfortunately, we don't have any more information right now.
Any other questions? Maybe in the back. Yeah.
Good morning, thank you. Laurie Chen from Reuters. I have two questions. So first of all, the G7 summit in Hiroshima is happening next week. What messages are the EU looking to send out, especially since China's reaction to the last G7 foreign ministers summit was quite sharp? Second question, China has announced investigations into various foreign consultancy firms and tightened its anti-espionage laws in recent weeks. What's your take on why China is doing this? And are European companies in China worried? Thanks.
On the G7 summit, I wouldn't dare to advance what the G7 statement will say. We will see. We had, as you said very well, we had a G7 foreign ministers meeting. I suppose they will gather all the G7 ministerial meetings results, but I wouldn't dare to advance what they will say. And on the anti-espionage law, that I don't know if it has been approved or is being discussed right now. Well, what I read and what I hear from business circles and the latest news on crackdowns on consultancies are not good news. And when you hear all the time the opening up and the continuous opening up of the Chinese economy, and this is, I'm not sure it is compatible with this kind of legislation, because it would allow for actions that are not very conducive to an atmosphere of opening up of the Chinese economy. But I can't comment on specific of this legislation.
Mr. Ambassador, I'm a journalist from Hong Kong, Daquintao, and with the mitigation of the pandemic, and you said that there is going to be more dialogue with China. And could I ask about, in terms of the cultural and tourism, what is the EU's plan in the future? And could you please give us some details? Thank you.
Well, the resumption of tourism is a direct consequence of the lifting of the restrictions. Unfortunately, it is being very gradual because of the lack of flights. Unfortunately, after 3 years of almost no flights between Europe and China, and also the fact that the Russian airspace is not being used by European airlines, it is difficult to go back to the frequency of flights we have. But it's a work in progress, and I'm sure there is tremendous interest by the Chinese public to go back to Europe, and also by the European public to come to China.
Hello, my name is Yolanda Alvarez from TVE, the Spanish public television. You said that you have been talking to China about peace, how is it possible in Ukraine, of course? How is it possible to talk about peace with a country that denies there is a war? I don't know if you asked them, if your request was like you have to recognize there is a war, because in the official speech there is never this word in media and official speech of China. And which are your expectations of this going forward, if you are optimistic or not?
Thank you very much. We have been talking since the start of the aggression, the Russian aggression in Ukraine on the 24th of February last year. We have been talking with China about this aggression. Of course, we all want peace, but we want a just peace. Just peace means that there has to be a reversal of what happened. And what happened was an aggression, an invasion, and worst of all, and something which is very dear for China, the worst of all is the organization by the invader of 3 succession referenda, which is the most blatant violation of territorial integrity. Something, a principle, which is very dear to China, as we all know. So we are talking with China about the Russian aggression in Ukraine, and we are talking about what a just peace should look like. We are not talking, how can we talk about peace with someone? We are telling them that they have to acknowledge that there have been an aggression, they have to acknowledge that there is an aggression, and that there is a victim. And this is a main point when we should start talking about peace.
Okay. We shall take 2 more questions. No one else? Okay, call me again.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not standing up. I've got this computer here.
No.
Would it be possible to sort of just summarize a little bit in relation to Ukraine and China's actions? So earlier you said that you didn't have any information about the delegation and where they will visit. Are you calling on China to share that information more quickly? I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to figure out, like, what is the message to China here on Ukraine that we can take away from this press conference? For example, would it be, number 1, please share this information with us as soon as possible, that would be helpful, or would it be to do with the fact that you said, their understanding and definitions around the word? Do they need to clarify that first before you can engage with them on the possibility of this delegation to the Ukraine? I'm just trying to see if there's a way to sort of succinctly summarize what you would like to say to China on the Ukraine issue, like today, here and now. Thank you.
Well, I see you were looking for a headline. I'm sorry to disappoint you, because we have no news. If you want to put a headline, we are trying to ask the Chinese. We are trying to talk to the Chinese government about where are they sending the special envoy and what are their intentions. But we still have no news.
Okay. 1 last question, or 2 last questions. Okay, it's short.
Mr. Ambassador, before the China's holiday last week, we saw an interview by China's ambassador to the EU, Fu Cong. He said that the China-EU relationship also has no limit. How do you, or how does the EU think about this standpoint? Thank you.
Well, he was talking about the no limits relationship between China and Russia, and that's why he said China and EU relationship has no limit. Well, it's a way to talk, if you want. We can say that China and the EU relationship has no limit, but what does it mean? Of course, everything has limits. We have limits in our relationship with everybody in the world. But if we want to be nice, we can say we have no limits relationship. But concretely, there are limits. We all know there are limits to any relationship. So I have nothing to comment. That I think it's a nice comment by my colleague Fu Chong, but it doesn't really mean anything. We want a constructive, positive relationship with China. Does this have a limit? Well, if we want, we can say whatever we want, but we know that we all have limits with a relationship with everybody.
Okay, now it's the last one. Okay. In the back, Reuters, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions. So, just to follow up my earlier question, are European firms worried about the crackdown on Bain and Catfish and other US consulting firms? And secondly, what's your position on the recent comments by High Representative and Vice President Borrell on possibly having EU navies patrolling the Taiwan Strait? Thank you.
On the first question, I already answered, I think. On the second, I have nothing to comment. I think it has been grossly exaggerated, what he said. But I have nothing to comment on my boss's statement.
Thank you. The press conference will end here. You are invited to stay in the room if you want, to send your notes and so on. Later at 11:30 we start the reception on the garden, and you are welcome to join us. Thank you. See you in a few minutes.
Qu'est-ce que tu fais? When are you coming to the office?
I don't know. It's actually like one of the not so many times I get out of the house. It's a little bit bad. I mean, like I'm still breastfeeding, you know. So that's yeah, you know. But I've been in touch with Dina.
Hello. Well, we are there. At the moment I have